You're tuned into the Growth Ceilings podcast, the show for builders, dreamers, and leaders ready to break limits and grow beyond what they thought possible.
Welcome to the Growth Ceilings podcast. I'm your host, Jim Lovelady, professional EOS implementer. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. This show is about real conversations with leaders who bring clarity to complex challenges and help organizations operate with confidence. Today, I'm joined by Dan Lubic. Dan is a sales leader and advisor who has built and led high-performing sales organizations across enterprise and global environments. His work focuses on diagnosing sales problems accurately and building infrastructure that supports consistent execution. Dan, welcome to the Growth Ceilings podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Great to see you again.
Likewise.
Dan, you've seen sales from the inside at many levels. Why do sales problems so often go misdiagnosed?
I would say it boils down to a sales infrastructure problem in most cases. And you see this particularly prevalent in the small to mid-sized segment, is many of those sales organizations have been piecemealed together. The founder started off leading the sales organization, up hiring somebody within the organization and says, I want you to handle the sales department. And then that person may end up becoming a sales manager, hires a couple salespeople. And all along the way, they've never had any type of formal sales infrastructure put into place. So what ends up happening is that typically when they're a small company starting out, the growth is coming mainly because they have a new solution and they're in that growth phase. So they don't recognize problems. Where they start to recognize problems is when competition sets in, and then they are not prepared to differentiate their solutions from their competitor solutions. And it always boils back down to the lack of sales infrastructure that's in place that would allow them to do that.
I can relate so much in what you just said. What do you believe is that common denominator, the mistake that's made time and time again? You kind of laid out like the progression of the recruiting process. What's missing in that recruiting effort? Not only perhaps for sales, but when you think about recruiting in general, it could be for finance, operations, other functional areas of a business. What do you believe is missing in these processes?
Yeah, I would say the biggest mistake that I see is this fixation on hiring people with industry experience. I don't care about industry experience when I hire salespeople. I want to hire the best salesperson that's out there. The industry experience is already within that organization. The salesperson, a good, talented salesperson, knows how to leverage that industry experience. So when they go to market, they look like an expert. I don't need my salesperson to be that expert. I need them to be the expert on sales. That's number one. And number two, this belief that's rarely works out is when I hire this salesperson, I'm hiring a book of business that they can bring over. Rarely works out. What it does do is sometimes it creates existing relationships, but they still have to compete for the business and they still have to win the business. Ultimately, people are not going to give business over to somebody just because they like them and they've worked with them in the past.
Yeah, I find it to be a really lazy characteristic or attribute of hiring managers that, legacy managers that, this is the only way they know how to do it. They go, hey, you got a book of business and all these other things
Right.
you just talked about, right? And it's just so tired and so ineffective, yet there's no accountability other than facing the fact that you're not going to hit your number later on. And then we all go like
Exactly.
this when it happens.
Yep.
And I'll add to what you talked about, and that is, what are the core values of the organization, culturally and otherwise, right? How are we hiring people based on the core values that we articulate about our business that make up our culture, make up our people, make up the people we want to work with, the people we want to attract, right? That's one. And then two, when we think about sales in particular, I use my arms kind of left and right, kind of like a wingspan here. I, as a salesperson, a good salesperson, I'm listening for what problem I'm going to solve for the customer. And I'm listening for opportunities where I can bring resources to the forefront in the solution that I'm going to build and provide for the customer. Yes, I may
Exactly.
have a core widget, a core solution, professional service, something that we do as a company that's going to help to solve that problem. But better yet, as a salesperson, do I have resources within the business that I am now orchestrating and bringing to the forefront to provide the customer the assurance that we've got the right people, experience, subject matter expertise, all the rest. I find that people who can orchestrate that are most effective. And that's why I agree with you, not having that industry experience, toss that out the window. If I can find somebody who can orchestrate, that's a winner.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more.
So let's come back to my questions for you today.
Yeah.
What are the most common signs that a sales system is broken, even when revenue looks acceptable?
When you're not doing a good job of forecasting. So, in other words, yeah, you might be beating your goal, but you don't know why. You can't explain why you're hitting your goal. Performance that's up and down. Very, it may be excellent one month and then it falls off the cliff the next month. That just goes to show that there's a lot of inconsistency in the processes that are in place because performance should be steady, forecasting should be accurate, and people should, be able to effectively know where they're going to end, whether they're going to be above plan or below plan.
Talk a little bit more about forecasting because you caught my attention with this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address that? When you see that the forecasting is unsatisfactory or it's not performing to what it should be doing, where do you typically look or how do you solve that?
Yeah, well, the root cause to that lies within pipeline management. So if a sales leader is not managing the pipeline with their account executives or account reps well, that's going to directly impact forecasting. So you should clearly know based on your pipeline, based on your close ratios, your historical win rates, what is going to be coming down the pike based on doing an analysis of your pipeline and managing your pipeline effectively.
I'll translate pipeline because I come from the same world
Mhm.
into from a sales management perspective, what's our scorecard? What are the key metrics for our sales organization? We're tracking that on a weekly basis. And every week we're looking at that. Are we on track or off track? And using that insight, if we're off track, to solve those issues
Right.
and assign a to do or a task that will get that done sooner than later. Nothing worse than coming up to the end of the quarter, missing your number, and everybody goes like this,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And I've been there. I've been parts of leadership teams where we do this. And
Right.
quite often, it's like you said, we didn't manage the pipeline or we didn't proactively manage the visibility into performance and therefore solve the issues and
Right.
help us to achieve our goals. So I
Yeah.
could go on and on about scorecards, but I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're talking about is the higher level view of what's going on with the pipeline and the scorecard, the activities feed the scorecard. So what I'm talking about
Yes.
is more of the coaching through the pipeline.
Yes.
And as the regular sales meetings that you're having, you're working with your team to get those opportunities moved through the pipeline as efficiently as possible. So the sales
Yes.
leader should know what's coming.
Excellent distinction and clarification. I completely agree with you. And it's a really important point because there is a distinction between activity and the coaching management of it. And there's
Exactly.
quantitative and qualitative, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Got it. So we'll come back to the recruiting point for a moment. Leaders often hire more salespeople to fix problems. Let's go hire a bunch of new people, right?
Right.
Why does that usually make things worse?
That goes back to a sales infrastructure issue that I was talking about earlier, because you're typically going to run into problems when your infrastructure is not sufficient. So hiring a bunch of salespeople into a process or an infrastructure that's in place that's broken is not going to solve your problem. All that's going to do is increase your expenses increase your frustration as a business leader. So what I advise my clients to do is let's get your infrastructure in place as sound as it possibly can be, and then you move on to the hiring and coaching and development from there.
What I see a lot of companies make the mistake, and I've been part of this, where we run and get to the fourth quarter and we're going to put our budget together for the forthcoming year. And we're going to go, okay, we think we can afford this many headcount. And we don't take into effect what's the sales cycle and when's the anticipated result? What time
Hmm.
do I need to onboard a new hire? When do I
Hmm.
think they will actually become effective? Do I have the tools in place to track and have visibility into performance? How am I coaching that person? What are we doing to overcome some of the roadblocks or the things that will encounter as a new employee gets started in their new role? And we just think, well, I'll hire somebody in January, therefore I'll have the result before the end of the year. And
Yeah.
it rarely works that way. I worked for a company many years ago. The owner of the company says, that first year, a salesperson, you hire that salesperson, he goes, they ain't worth shit the first year. And he was
Hmm.
absolutely right. And I still
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, depending on the industry you're in, there's always going to be a ramp up period for your salespeople. And I'm going to go back to the infrastructure. I'm probably going to beat this to death. Is the fact of the matter is, the stronger your infrastructure is, the faster ramp up is going to be as well, because you now have the pieces in place to directly onboard that person in the most effective and efficient manner. Without a strong infrastructure, the onboarding is going to be inconsistent. It's going to be very dependent on that person's own adaptability and luck and those types of issues.
We've been throwing around the word infrastructure, and I get it. Let's define it for our audience. Why don't you give me your definition of infrastructure?
Okay. Yeah. So to me, sales infrastructure boils down to, the sales strategy. Do you have a strong strategy in place? Do you have um, clear differentiation of what your product is versus your competition? What the buyer experience is like? Do you really understand your ICP and how to develop your value proposition and quantify your value proposition? Then you have the sales methodology. Okay. Who is selling? How do they sell? Who do they sell to? And then you have the sales organization, which is your hiring, it's your coverage. Are you going to have inside sales reps, outside sales reps? Are you going to have global uh, uh, sales team, or are you just going to have local field territories? And then what's your leadership cadence going to be? How are you going to conduct sales meetings? How often? What is the structure of those meetings going to be? Are they going to be where they're just numbers focused, or are they going to be coaching focused? Okay. And then you have sales analysis. This is what you were talking about earlier about the KPIs and what I was talking about with the pipeline.
Right.
It's, how the activities that you're coaching to are driving the output of the sales organization. So you can monitor those at a high level, and you have a dashboard, and you clearly understand if the compensation plan is driving the right behavior, if the sales process is driving the right behavior, and if the sales team is executing on the activities that are going to drive the right results. So those are the main components of a sales infrastructure.
And within what you just defined and how you described that, you may have answered this next question, but I'm going to kind of wrap it all up with this one. How does weak leadership show up inside of a sales organization?
Yeah, again, you're going to have inconsistent performance. You're going to have a sales team that's not developing and growing. So let me give you an example of a weak leader and a strong leader, if I
Yep.
can. Okay. A weak sales leader is somebody that sits in the office and they go over those KPIs. They pick up the phone and they call the salesperson and say, "You haven't closed anything in the last 30 days. Your sales call numbers are down. Your overall quarterly business reviews are down. You're not meeting this number. You're not meeting that number." That's a poor leader. A good leader is somebody that's out with your team, coaching them on a regular basis. And what they're doing is they're coaching them on the actual behaviors that drive the KPIs, not the KPI itself. Coaching them how to create value, how to execute on a sales call cadence that's going to create value,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. So they're out there coaching and developing. And finally, what they're doing is they're helping get opportunities pushed over the edge. So they're sitting with them and saying, "Okay, where are we at with this opportunity? What can I do? What can, the VP of operations do? What can the CEO do? What can we do to get this thing over the edge?" And
Yes.
that's what a good sales leader does.
Yes. What you just described was that orchestration I was talking about a few moments ago, where a good salesperson is going to be able to orchestrate exactly what you just said, pull that together. And it's a unique talent And when you see it, you know it. And if you've got it on your team, you need to make that repeatable so that everybody understands that behavior and is able to take advantage of doing exactly what you just said. And I look also as each touch with a prospect, whether it be audibly through a call or an email or some other interaction, but then I get a meeting with that prospect. Each one of these touches with the customer. What's the value that you're providing to that customer? It may be in that orchestration of resources I talked about. It may be in the messaging. It may be something that I'm giving to that customer to consider, to contemplate, to expand the idea around what it is we're trying to solve for them. And when you do that, if you come in with the mindset of value each time, you will find that you will hopefully take off some of that cycle time, and better yet, get to the end of the objective, that is to win more business. And at the same time, the customer feels he or she is getting the most value possible. So that's the important part.
Yep, absolutely.
So what role does process play versus talent in sustained sales performance?
Again, process is critically important, providing you have the right infrastructure in place. And I've always known and have seen throughout my career, if you have people follow a proven process, sales is a science, okay? There's a science to interacting with a client. There's a science to creating value. Okay. That's a process. If you follow that process clearly, you don't even have to be a good salesperson. So you're still going to close business. So I always say sales is 60% science, 40% art. What differentiates a good salesperson from a superstar salesperson is that salesperson that can incorporate the science, following those processes, and then that 40% art where they can come over and really relate to a client, really drive home what the value means so
Yes.
the client can feel it and it's tangible. That's what creates the difference between a superstar and just a regular performer. But if you follow the processes correctly, the science of sales, you're gonna be successful regardless.
Outstanding. So, how do data and AI change how sales teams should be managed today?
Okay. So I think AI and data is a double-edged sword, I should say. When I talked about that leader that sits in the office and just goes over numbers and
Yes.
beats the team up over the numbers, that's what you got to be careful of. Do not fall into the analytics, data analytics trap and the AI trap of beating people up because of this number or that number. The way I see it is those are tools. They don't replace what I was talking about before, is the coaching, the hands-on development of your team is critically important in that role. AI, though, is an enhancer of good practices. It's an enhancer of good analytics as well. AI can now be taken on the tasks that are mainly administrative that your salesperson has been having to do their entire career. So what does that do? I'm sure you've heard the term corrupted sales time. Salespeople are out there working, 40-hour, 50-hour week, but all 40 or 50 hours is not necessarily on selling. A lot of it's on doing administrative tasks. We call that corrupted sales time. AI is a very, very valuable resource to reduce customer corrupted sales time. And what that does is that just multiplies the effectiveness of your sales organization. So rather than hiring more salespeople, you can use AI to make your salespeople that you currently have that much more effective. And that effectively is hiring more salespeople, if you will.
So, Dan, when you step into a struggling sales organization, what's the first thing you look at?
Infrastructure, without a doubt. What I do is I'll go in and I'll examine every part of their infrastructure. And so often what I'll see is in the small to mid-sized world, they do have every component of the sales infrastructure. The problem is that their sales infrastructure is incomplete because they've never had sales professionals create it. Okay. They've had people who've come in and have risen through the organization, but never really had any formal sales training or development. So almost all the time, there are problems with the infrastructure that's in place. And then many small to mid-sized companies that I work with, I'm talking about companies in the $5 to $50 million range. Many of them have, very few parts of the sales infrastructure. Some don't have any at all.
I'm going to get a count through AI how many times we've used the word infrastructure in this conversation today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's,
I knew the answer before I asked the question.
yeah, exactly.
What
Yeah.
advice would you give a CEO facing flat or declining revenue right now?
I would say sales is probably one of the most difficult things to manage if you're not an expert at it. It's go ahead and bring in some expertise. There's plenty of people out there. You can hire people like me, other sales consultants that are out there. We've spent our careers, inside major corporations where we've run the most disciplined sales organizations on the planet. We know what needs to happen to be successful. That knowledge is very, very affordable in the current market. There is a fractional network of sales leaders out there, and not just fractional sales leaders, there's fractional CFOs, there's fractional CPOs, fractional everything.
Yes.
But I would say the one area that is really, really critical is your revenue producer. Revenue is the lifeblood of an organization. Make the investment in hiring one of these experts to come in and at least assess where you're at, help you lay the foundation for a plan that will allow you to address it, because you should be growing on a regular basis. And even during downturns, economical slowdowns, those to me are your greatest opportunities to grow when you have a great sales team, because what ends up happening there is organic growth, which your competitors are relying on, falls through the roof, falls through the floor, and then you're prepared to go out and get their growth.
Okay, I'll get you out of here on this. Why don't you take a few moments and share with the audience your company, what you do specifically, what brought you to this point, and what you offer today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, um, I am a member of the Sales Acceleration Network. We're the largest fractional sales leadership organization in the country. We have over 222 advisors throughout the country. What ended up getting me into this is when I worked in the corporate world, I got to work with many small to mid-sized companies, and I got to see that the revenue generation portion was one of the areas that a lot of these great companies were lacking expertise in. And I recognized that there was an opportunity to help a lot of small to mid-sized companies and make life-changing business moves for them. So that's what kind of drove me into wanting to go down this path. I am a fractional sales leader, and I help small to mid-sized companies that mainly business to business that are looking to accelerate growth. Typically, companies that are in the 5 to 50 million range is where I can have my biggest impact.
I think what brought you and I together is we're complementary to each other, where you've
Yeah.
got subject matter expertise deep
Yep.
into
Right.
sales, sales process, sales infrastructure,
Right.
and you bring years of experience from a corporate environment, corporate level. Can I say FedEx?
Yep. Absolutely.
Years and years, decades actually, of that type of experience, which is invaluable. And then what I bring to the table, and I'm using my arms again, kind of in a east-west spread out horizontally, is a business operating system. So the cross between the two is
Hmm.
complementary.
Yep.
I help entrepreneurs, business owners, their leadership teams get on the same page by understanding who they are, what they do, and where they're going, helping them gain discipline and accountability, generating traction in the business, and ultimately making the business healthy. So everybody understands their role, responsibility, and contribution to the business. And when we do that, there's a transformation that happens. And so oftentimes I'm asked, hey, Jim, will you sell for us? Or do you know someone who has this kind of experience? In particular, almost every company has a need for some level of sales and sales infrastructure. So that's where you and I
Yep.
come together and complement each other
Right.
really well.
Yeah, yeah. No, and if I could, I'd just like to just close with one other item. If you turn on CNBC, Bloomberg Business, or Fox Business, whatever business show you like to watch, and you hear all of the interviews of the CEOs that come in during the days, and during rough economic times, you often hear them come in and say, we're laying off this person, or we're laying off this group, this many jobs, and that's going to help our profits. You almost never hear a CEO come in and say, we're laying off salespeople. In fact, Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, they just, I think, laid off 4,000 or 5,000 back office jobs, and they ended up hiring another 3,000 salespeople, members to their sales team.
What does
So
that tell you?
that tells you that no major corporation would ever go to market without a robust sales organization, number one. And so why is that? Because they have to grow. So my message to the small to mid-sized companies is, if you have to grow or you want to grow, why would you go to market without a major sales organization in your business?
You mentioned a bunch of business organizations in the media and so forth. You missed one. That's this Growth Ceilings podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Dan, I enjoy speaking with you. This has been a great conversation. You've brought clarity to an area where many leaders feel frustration and confusion. Your approach helps companies move from guessing to understanding what actually drives sales performance. For listeners who want to learn more, you can connect with Dan on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining me today, and thanks to everyone for listening and for being a part of the Growth Ceilings community. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and keep breaking through. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great.
You've been watching the Growth Ceilings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to grow.